It's that time again. It's time for some PROLIX comics bollocks. With me, Cupboard Kit, and him.
Uh, Small Nose Joe.
Two of the more pathetic Dick Tracy villains. Um,
Yes, indeed. So it is in fact the great Dick Tracy we're talking about
yes,
today on the show. Um,
which
so
it actually seems like quite a big topic to cover. So we're actually just we'll do a bit of an overview, but we're pretty much looking at one little corner of it, and probably maybe one of the least interesting corners because I went with my
your
for
usual approach.
yeah.
Let's start at the very beginning
For long time viewers,
with
people
the.
know me and
This is the cave paintings of Lascaux
yes,
version of Dick Tracy.
and this is what scuppered the Hubris on Toast project.
Hmm.
Yes, so me and Nick have very different approaches to when we get into something. Nick seems to go for the uh
What's considered to be the classic run of X or
yes,
Y or Z?
yes, yes, yes. Just something to get you into it, the gateway drug to. Whereas I insist, no, 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 no. The original, this
Mhm.
character first popped up. Yes, on he carved onto a pot in
Yes, in
the
ancient
6th
Mesopotamia.
century. Yes, so that's where we're going to start.
Yeah, we're going to start with the Dick Tracy clay tablets.
Yes, and all that early run of that comic or those novels or whatever, which are really boring and crap until someone found their voice and got good. We're doing them first to make sure that we
Have
will
a thorough
never
grounding.
we will never watch any or read any of that stuff again.
Although
Yeah.
I will say, actually, I will now actually follow up, and I will go because, funnily enough, I read the introduction to other introductions to the volumes. These are all volumes published by by IDW, right? So
Yes.
it's a collected. This is the collected Chester Gould dailies and Sunday strips of Dick Tracy. They all have introductions by Max Allan Collins, who, in addition to probably being most famous for writing Road to Perdition and various other books, early in his career really got his start writing, taking over from Chester Gould and writing Dick Tracy.
Yes.
Um, and so he, so in reading, so I read all the strips. I will admit, the only thing I didn't do is I got to the end and realized that the last bunch of Sunday strips were out of continuity, and I was like, I fucking can't be bothered to read them. I don't know, did you get to the end of the entire volume
Oh,
yourself?
I am a few pages short,
Okay.
to admit.
Um,
But it was a little, I mean, we'll get to it. It was a little bit like kind of chewing cud towards the
at
end.
times,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
And so that last set of strips, because at a certain point, I guess the Sunday strips were just their own thing, telling their own little mini stories, and then
Right.
you get the continuing narrative of the newspaper strip. But then he started working the Sundays in so that they filled in the next part of the story.
Mm.
So yeah, when I realized that everything I was going to read would actually not connect to what I'd read before. I was like,
Yeah, no, this is
I
very
feel good.
these volumes put on out by IDW, which are out of print and expensive now, but someone's put them up on archive.org. I don't know how
Hmm.
long they'll be there, but you can read them there. I mean, they're very much for the hardcore completist, right?
Hmm.
Like this, yeah. So we'll do our not fun Clive Dick Tracy episode, and then at some point Nick's gonna do the business and he's
Yes.
gonna choose something good, and then we'll do the fun Dick Tracy episode
That's
at
what
some
I
point.
so when I read the very last thing I read, which is earlier today, I went back and I read the introduction
Yeah.
and the interview with Chester Gould done in around 1980 by Max Allan Collins, and he himself is very upfront. Like, this is definitely not really the place to begin. This is
Right.
not the best of the work. And then he tells you kind of what is. He actually gives you a few stories. He's like, these are the ones
Yes.
that
Yes.
you need to read. And I was like,
From what
oh,
I
okay,
understand,
well.
from what I understand, the what we know Dick Tracy for, the big kind of colourful characters like Flat Top and Grotesque and stuff like that, they start
Face of
coming in like the 40s, right? Like the mid 40s.
yes.
So yeah, we'll be going there next, I
Oh
think.
yeah. And I
I'm
wonder
not going to
too.
do from 19th. It's okay,
Oh,
it's fine. This is one of
yeah.
those. I've learned my lesson. I mean, obviously, if I turn into a complete Chester Gould insane fanatic, I'll go back. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think I'm
Mhm.
probably good with just
And
the
I'm
good
like,
stuff.
I'm
Cherry.
kind of fascinated by the idea because I went and read the Wikipedia article. Were you aware that there's this period of time when Dick Tracy goes to space
Yes,
and
it
has
goes a bit
like
SF. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
I
and
didn't
like
know
the
that.
yeah, and like I don't know, there's a moon princess that somehow marries like Dick Tracy Jr. It all got very weird sounding to me as I read that. I was like, what's this all about?
Yeah, I'm tempted by that as well. I mean, on a slight tangent before we get into it as well, this reminded me as well of how bizarre I've always found the idea. So when I was growing up, you had in the newspapers, you had your comic strips and like the 3 or 4 panel gag comic strips,
Mhm.
like Hagger the Horrible or
Yeah,
something.
yeah, yeah. Marmaduke.
Yeah, I understood these.
Hmm.
I couldn't quite get my head round George and Lynn, but
Hmm.
there was tits in them.
Yes,
That was
which
all
was
right.
weird.
But I remember thinking like, so for instance, we were both 2000 AD kids. I remember, was it the Mirror, one of the papers or the Star or something,
Yeah, it's a mirror. Yeah,
had
I
a
believe.
Judge Dredd
Or yeah, I'm sorry.
issue.
Yeah. Yes.
And but then I realized I've never really understood, like, for instance, when it's collected like this, it makes total sense. You just read the
Yeah.
entire story, but I never understood
A
a
four-panel
yeah,
serial.
yeah. Like take you like 15 seconds or something, and then to wait for tomorrow now. Like
Yes.
very frustrating. Even as a 2008, as a Judge Dredd fan, as a kid, I kind of I just went spare, like waiting for
Yes.
the
Until they got the collection, and then when they collected them, they
collected.
were
That's
great.
fine. But it's interesting. Did people really enjoy? Like, are they for people with the most short attention spans in the world or something? Like, I've never understood the concept of the newspaper serial comic. And while we're on it, because you probably know, because you know these things more, what were the Judge Dredd strips? Were they original stories totally apart from what turned up in
Yes,
20?
absolutely. But they were
Right.
written by John Wagner and Alan Grant,
Huh.
and they were illustrated by Ron Smith mostly. I think, or maybe exclusively Ron Smith. So it was absolutely a product of the same people doing 2000
Interesting.
Red for 2000 AD. It was like a side gig for them,
They
more
were
or less.
very. I remember they were very colourful. So, because they were not black and white. I seem to remember the Judge Dredd strips were colour.
Sundays would have been maybe yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure if the dailies would have been.
So they've been collected now. I'm assuming there must be a
Yeah,
volume.
well, I bought them back before I even moved to Canada. I bought them
Oh, okay.
in
And
88, 89
and they're
as
worth reading.
oversized, and they were great. Yeah,
Okay.
and I'm sure Rebellion Press. I have no doubt that they're still in print through Rebellion. So
Right. Right.
um, but yeah, no, it is a weird thing, and but I also at the same time you really see the effect on cinema. I think in like the serials of cinema really do owe a heavy debt to the serial comic book page. So I mean, because Flash Gordon as well, right?
Yeah.
This idea of like, but it's crazy because you get a cliffhanger every 4 panels. Like it's just compare even to like the cinematic serial you do. You get like you get more story before we get to the oh shit he fell off a cliff or oh how's he
Right.
gonna get to this one? But it's like every fourth panel, you're like, ooh, shock, surprise. But it does work. It actually kept me reading.
No, I will
So
say it wasn't that much of a chore as I'm making it out to be, but it clearly evolved into something more interesting later. And I certainly didn't realize looking it up, and I certainly and reading the intros and stuff, I wasn't aware because obviously we came in when we were born. Dick Tracy was already old hat in a certain way,
hmm,
like it had been around for fucking decades. And then
yeah,
the
I would have
the
seen the
only thing,
60s cartoon is probably the first thing I
yeah,
would
we'll
assume.
we'll talk about that.
Mhm.
But and then of course there was the Warren Beatty film, right, which was
Mhm.
just a total. I remember going to see that. I was going to rewatch it. Did you have a chance to
I
rewatch it?
did the first 25 minutes, and we'll
Did,
talk about that when we get
okay,
to that, maybe.
okay, we'll wait then because I kind of remember that going to see that as a kid. But yeah, so it was interesting for us. I think it was just another character in the gallery of
Yeah.
we didn't really have a context, and it was interesting to learn from the intros and the wiki and stuff, because to be believed how groundbreaking it was in terms of like Dick Tracy using certain methods like
Lie,
fingerprinting and
yeah, lie
style.
detectors
Yeah,
and
yeah,
a lot of stuff that apparently had never been seen in fiction before.
right. And then later on, he got his little two-way wristwatch radio
Yes.
thing. And yeah, getting into the 40s, that's apparently when they start introducing the real over-the-top
Rogue
criminal.
Scout.
Yeah, which I guess must have been inspired by like the likes of Al Capone, people like having it, because they all had like the Scarface, and so it's all
Hmm.
that stuff just dialed up to 11, right?
I
Basically.
wonder too, though, so I haven't looked into this too much. Which came first, the Rogues Gallery in Batman or the Rogues Gallery in
Ah,
Dick Tracy? Because like the Joker and those kind of characters who are grotesques as well,
yeah, yeah. Batman, I think
Batman
might
being
have.
being a detective, right? Like this
Yeah,
concept
yeah.
of him
That's
being
interesting.
I
Batman
wonder
probably first, actually. I think
if there was a kind of, or there was kind of a back and forth thing
maybe
possibly, where they were influencing each other.
because Joker comes in quite early on, doesn't
Oh,
he?
very early. Yeah.
And he seems to be inspired by the Man Who Laughs, right?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And all that.
Like, yeah, visually, absolutely. Yeah.
And the Batman himself is based on the Bat, right? And
And
that's
I'll say that this really hit me when I was actually watching the live action, the Warren Beatty movie was, oh, Sin City, like Frank Miller's Sin City, not just the comic, but the
right.
movie owes a fairly hefty debt, also in its rogues, like its
Interesting.
grotesques, and the kind of that noiry vibe that the Dick Tracy stuff has going right back to the
Yeah,
beginning.
but I think the Warren Beatty film, again from memory, you'll be able. I think it was it might have been a kind of noble attempt to try something and a little bit ahead of its
Yeah.
way, but didn't really pull it off properly.
Yeah, I think it was also it came out too close to the Batman film.
But
Uh,
that's what I was going to say. That's the coincidence as well that they both kind of around at the same, and they have
yeah,
definitely do have a similar vibe to them, don't they?
yeah,
What I remember of the Warren Beatty, because I went to the theater to see it. I remember with my sister and brother-in-law. I remember us all being kind of disappointed, but basically when it wasn't the Rogues Gallery on screen, it was
mhm.
quite boring.
Yes.
But the
Although,
actual Rogues Gallery was super cool. Is it
because
the
the
whole
actors,
laptop and um
yeah, William Forsythe, right?
William Forsythe? Yes.
He's amazing as Flat Top.
Yeah, oh, he's flat top, is he? I can't remember who does Al Pacino? Is it Mumbles or something? Because they got
Uh,
Toon Face or something like that.
no, no, Mumbles is Dustin Hoffman.
Ah, okay. Oh, that would make sense. He didn't have to do
Yeah,
anything. Yeah,
yeah, and then I know. So Big Boy Caprice, who was basically the most obvious Al Capone kind of
right.
stand. That's Al Pacino, and I will say he is having a really good time.
Yeah, I
Uh,
remember.
like,
I remember
like
that
he
from.
is chewing scenery like I've never seen him, and clearly in his element. And then my favorite one, of course, is it Influence? Is that his name? Anyway, it's the one actor that you think like, yeah, they did. Why did they put makeup on Henry Silva to make him look more like Henry Silva? Because all they've done is just brought out his actual Silvaness. Like it's just they just put a Silva mask on Henry Silva and had
I
him.
think Henry Silva was actually just drawn by Chester Gould. I think,
I suspect he escaped from the pages.
like
Yeah.
that aha video.
Yes, exactly. Him and his like soul brother or whatever, Jack Palance. They're two actors who easily could have played.
Comic book characters on the loose.
Yes.
Roger
Um,
Rabbit's got to bring them back to Toontown.
exactly. Get
Top of
Christopher
all
Lloyd.
space, I guess.
Um, but no, I think the thing that actually surprised me. So in the collection, we actually begin with something that I don't know. I mean, if you're into comics, you probably know this. But if you're not into newspaper comics, you might not. But then, in order to basically sell a newspaper comic, you have to create a series of strips that are then shopped around, right, to the syndicates. Which sounds like really
Sounds
organized
like
crime, actually.
yeah,
But basically, and then they either they pass on them or they don't. And so a lot of Calvin and Hobbes, for example, right? Waterston created two or three other sets of like, and you have to do quite a lot. You have to do like 25 or 50 strips or whatever, and create
Right.
the whole set of characters, the whole thing. And
Just to
then
stop you there, sorry, mid. Just because you mentioned it, because I don't think I have any opinion at all. Where do you stand on Calvin and Hobbes?
I haven't read it in a long time, but I thought it was brilliant
Brilliant.
when I was a teenager. Yeah.
I
And
do
even into my
remember it was in something when I was a kid, some newspaper. I don't even remember who the fuck is it, like a little boy and a tiger or something. I don't even remember what it is.
yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
It is that. Yeah,
It's
okay.
a teddy bear tiger that he basically imagines, or does it? It's actually left a little bit open to interpretation whether or not.
Okay. The only
Yeah.
thing I remember, there's a scene, I think, in Point Break or something, where Gary Busey's reading and he's going, this Calvin and Hobbes are really funny. That's the only thing. It's Gary Busey, so uh,
hmm
yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. It worked for me, but I remember a good friend of mine found it irritating. Another friend from art school, he found it overly wordy and overly kind of like, yeah, he found it like took itself too seriously for what it was.
Okay.
I
Well,
quite like
thanks.
what.
Thanks for that, Nick, for that little tangent. I was just wondering. Carry on your choo-choo train of thought there then, Nick.
Yes. So yeah, I think one of the things that's nice about this is they show us that. They show us basically the set of strips that he created in order to sell the idea. And at that point, it was plain clothes Tracy.
That's right. Yes.
And he's wearing a little straw boater instead of like his fedora. And you can kind of see some of the kinks getting worked out. But one of the things that's surprising to me is like from the get-go, they are surprisingly violent. And I mean, okay,
Yes.
compared to now, yeah, okay, like, but the thinking this is like the early 1930s. This is the newspaper that like very quickly we have a scene of like a big boy Caprice like using like a blowtorch on a guy's feet, and you're like,
Yes.
holy shit,
Yeah.
that's a lot. Like you're like
Well,
Saturday, your morning read on the commute or whatever.
it's nicely hard boiled, isn't it? And
Yeah,
you have to think as well, it was before people started pumping out the film noirs as well, right? So it wasn't as
mhm.
if people had yet become normalized to that, level of, I mean, they're not quite there, but there's a lot of like sarcastic humor and,
Yeah,
police and detectives not necessarily doing bad things or anything like that, but just have that kind of slight world weary edge to
yes.
them, right? That comes with kind of hanging out with the underworld, right? Like,
hmm
so you can see the appeal of the Dick Tracy character almost immediately.
Yes, yeah,
And yeah, with his square jaw, and there's something. It's not lost on me. I kind of get it. I understand.
yes, yeah. And he punches the shit out of people constantly. Like it's quite
Yeah,
astonishing as you go, like how much actual fisticuffs and gunplay and how many people die.
yeah, yeah,
That I
yeah.
wasn't expecting that. And in one case, quite near the end of the story, there's and unfortunately, the actual drawing is kind of it's a pretty rough
Yeah, I
sort
think
of
they got
just
better as well, didn't they? Was
well, yeah, I'm specifically talking. There's a very sort of like racially kind of
Oh, I
tinged
see.
characterization, right, of like a housemaid, right, somewhere
Yes,
in
I
out
remember that.
west, right? Yes, and you're like, oh yes, this doesn't fly anymore. But she then gets killed by Dick Tracy, kind of by accident, and then it's just hand waved away, like, that happened. And
Right.
they just go on. And you're like, wait, what? Just what? Um,
Yeah.
yeah, like no one makes anything of it, and it's but that kind of stuff happens throughout the stories where things or Junior, right, who it turns out is the most annoying character in the movie as well as in the comics.
Right.
Um, the kid sidekick is always like but
Oh,
at least
in the
the stuff with
serial, it's Smiley Burnett who's the most annoying character. In the serials, there's like two. You got the kid who's not really a comic relief, but there's a comic relief as played by Smiley Burnett as well, and he's the most irritating by far.
okay.
Yeah, he's like the
Uh,
equivalent of the dwarf falling in a bucket of water.
Right.
Frame moment, you know. Yeah.
But
And
the
Tracy is
kid,
always doing that. Like Smiley Bennett does some annoying thing, and everyone goes, yeah.
right. I haven't seen that many of the original. I think I've just watched one. I think I started watching the Dick Tracy versus Crime Inc. or whatever it was.
Okay, I watched the whole of the first Dick Tracy series, 15 episodes. Yeah, because
Okay.
you know me, I'm a serial guy. Anyway, I love my serials. So
Yes. Yes. So yeah. And what I will say this, I will come back to this, but Ralph Bird, I think, is a really
yes,
solid
yes,
Tracy.
and he plays him in those four serials, and then returned for the second, the last two of the
Two of
four
the movies.
monogram movies in the 40s,
Yeah.
which
And
are good
then
too.
again,
Yeah,
yeah. I watched Dick Tracy versus Gruesome with Boris Karloff, and I
right.
enjoyed it way more than I thought I was going to.
Yeah, I watched all four back in the day, and I remember them being pretty solid.
And then he came back again for a television series in the 50s, and
I didn't get a chance to look at that.
I watched one episode with Flat Top in it, and we talked about this off air, but I was really taken not just with the episode because it was again just a bit harder edged than I would have expected for 50s television. There's something a little bit more like mean about it all. And
Hmm.
then the guy playing Flat Top, his performance was not what I would have expected from a TV series in the 50s. He was much kind of scarier. And then given this ridiculous flat like hat thing that he was wearing, so he should have been risible and funny, and somehow he was acting beyond it and being fairly chilling.
Also
Which is
on
what,
YouTube, I noticed they had the pilot for a failed TV series from '67 or something like that as well. I didn't see that.
yeah, I was thinking about checking that out later on as well. But but yeah, I don't know where I was going with
Well,
all of
I was
this,
just
but
it was
anyway,
an opportunity to say the serial is good. The '37 serial
okay.
is not. It's funny. I like my serials anyway. I would say it's not up there. Well, the thing what I realized recently, because I've been watching quite a lot of serials recently, because I've finally got the idea of watching like a chapter a day, which is
Mm,
the way to do it. It's funny, the more I watch it, you do have like top tier. You do have things like Adventures of Captain Marvel, which is great, or
oh
King
yeah.
Rocket Men, or really classic with Flash
And
Gordon.
the first Flash Gordon, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But it's amazing. Certainly 30s and 40s, 50s maybe is a different story, but like they're quite consistently good. Like most of the
Mhm.
serials I've seen, I mean, they just go for it. Like I can understand the appeal on the makers of Turkish cinema, right? Which we'll get
Yes.
a bit about. Like, because they're just rock'em sock'em from like,
Hmm.
they don't flag at all. And yeah, the 37 Dick Tracy serial at least is yeah, it's just it keeps moving, right? It
Hmm.
keeps moving. Smiley Bennett's annoying for a little while, but then it just shifts, and it's got
And
lots
so
of
it is,
little sci-fi ideas, like trying to bring down the Bay Bridge and
yeah.
like this.
I noticed that too. Actually, that's something I noticed in all of the versions that I watched, that there was more of a science fiction bent to like a lot of the villains and their plans, or machines that could make them invisible, or there's these various things you're like, oh, that's quite an out there, more than these earlier comics. There's not as much of that in these early. They are more grounded. They're more
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Depression era hobos on trains, like.
Yes.
And
Yes.
in fact, that's a character I really like. Is that scumbag that beats up Junior a lot, like Tramp Steve, whatever the fuck his name is. Like, he seems really real, that guy. And that's something, again, like violence towards women and children, like things that, again, by the 50s, you know the post Frederick Wortham. In fact, I noticed in the interview, and in the kind of the front pieces, they were talking about that, how, what a chilling effect that all had on, the kind of stuff, like, like Chester Gould clearly felt very free on the comics page in the 30s and 40s to just fucking let it all hang out, before they started to nail that stuff down and be like, no, 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 comics are for kids. Kids need
Right.
to be protected from
Right.
images of violence and
And of course, other people did do Chester Gould after a while. Dick Tracy, sorry, it wasn't just you got the Dick Tracy comics and stuff like that, and of course it carried on, like you mentioned, after he died, and Max Allan Collins wrote for a while. Let's talk about the 1960s cartoon then, by the same
Ooh,
people who made
ooh.
Mr. Magoo, right?
Yes, yes, and apparently there is a crossover episode,
Yes,
Mr.
I'm
Who
quite
meets
keen to see.
Tracy, which I haven't seen. Yeah, I watched a couple of episodes. Like you and I talked about this off air. What I mostly remembered is the very best part of it, which is the credits scene.
Yes, yes. It's
Which,
funny. I was delighted all over it. I remember when I was a kid, Dick Tracy would come on. I think it was on. Was it on? I think it was like a BBC would show it as filler or something, or
yes,
turned up somewhere. And yeah, the beginning, it's got this overhead shot of like traffic and the little black squares moving away, and the theme tune. And then what I really found evocative as a kid and now as well, then you get this point of view shot of like pedestrians in the headlight
yeah,
glare
yeah,
of the car, and it feels really scary and edgy, or
yeah.
this
Yeah, it
dark.
reminds me of those scenes in like an Umberto Lenzi, like Polizio, of like
Yeah,
like
yeah,
going
yeah, yeah.
through the streets
Calling
and
Dick
like
Tracy,
shit
calling Dick
happening, and
Tracy. And
yeah, no,
then it's some kind of actually not bad, but bog standard kind of comical
well, because first of all, because Dick Tracy is not in
in it.
any of the
No,
episodes, other than at the very beginning, put somebody else on the job.
one of his sidekicks, which are all comical. There's like a fat cop. There's Gogo Gomez. Of course, our favorite, I'm sure, is Joe Jitsu.
Jiu-Jitsu, yes,
So
yes,
sorry, please. I mean,
yes.
he's yeah, he's quite
Ooh,
yeah.
yeah, this is why apparently they pulled them, I guess, from syndication some years later. I think either
But
in
they were on TV in the 80s in the UK.
Yes, I know. Yes. And I think they probably got to the 70s in the States before there was enough like yeah, complaints to say you maybe don't show these anymore.
But the thing
Um
is, I didn't remember any of that. I only
no,
remembered that
the
opening.
opening and how awesome it is.
Yeah, and I always wondered, oh, was that Dick Tracy cartoon any good? I don't remember anything. And oh well, no, that's why, because it's kind of a bit of a bait and
The
switch.
bait and switch for sure. Yes. I will say though, it does actually have the Rogues Gallery characters in it. And
Yes.
I ended up watching another their version of Flat Top in the episode I watched, and the voice actor was doing a Peter Lorre. Uh,
Yes. Yes.
and I was
Down here. Yeah, 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 yeah.
yeah, and I
That
was
was
kind
fun.
of enjoying that, and because
To be fair,
comparing,
that was quite funny. I quite like because his sidekick is that guy with the beady eyes, right?
yes,
Yeah.
yeah,
I
yeah,
quite liked that episode. It was quite funny because there wasn't a really racist character in the middle of it. So
yes, there was.
a little
That
bit
was
of
the one where it's like a bulldog cop somehow,
yes,
like a
yes.
talking dog.
I'm
So
assuming he comes back again at a certain.
mhm,
But it's so weird that because that's the first on that collection that's on YouTube. That's the
yeah,
first episode, and the weird gear shift from that, and then suddenly, yeah, there's a fucking dog
talking dog.
wearing a helmet, and you're like, what? It's
Yes.
very odd. It's a very
Yeah.
odd combo. I wonder
I
why he
wonder how
decided to frame it like that. Like,
I wonder how Chester Gould felt about it, given that it was so far from off the page from what he was actually doing. Because at that point, he would have been still doing the comics.
yeah, 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 yeah. And you got Mel Blanc doing voices on it, and like,
Yes.
um, yeah, I do want to see that crossover with Mr. Because I always enjoyed Mr. Magoo's, and again, not a character apparently in vogue anymore. You're not allowed to make
Yes.
fun of. But I always
Yeah.
thought Mr. Magoo, and to be fair, genius casting when they did do the live action to get Leslie Nielsen to do it.
Oh, yes.
'Cause
Yes.
that's a
That's
Stanley
funny.
Park film as well. Right? It's
Actually,
like
that's it.
between
Sorry, I was
doing
gonna,
big action Jackie Chan films, he directs Mr. Magoo with Leslie Nielsen.
but then I was gonna say, actually, that's the other thing that the opening reminds me of. I'm sure that it was a big influence on Police Squad, the opening of
Yeah,
Police Squad, with the siren and the whole thing.
yeah, 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 yeah. I hadn't thought about it. Yeah, damn right. Yeah.
Um, but and then so apparently so then there's I did look it up, but I think I maybe just watched a few minutes. Then there was apparently an 80s or 70s cartoon version that was part of the Archie like
Yes, that sounds vaguely familiar because I do
And
remember
apparently it was much
another.
closer. Apparently
Yes,
it was much closer to the spirit of the comics
because I
than.
think I mixed the two up. I think I mixed that opening theme up of the
Mhm.
cartoon. So I do remember a more, yeah, photorealistic kind
Like
of,
faithful
yeah.
adaptation. Yeah.
But
Um,
I don't remember if it was good. But yeah, it was definitely around, I think.
mhm.
I think maybe even at some point they might even have both kind of been on, which was really confusing
Yes.
because you didn't
Right.
know if you which one you were gonna get, right?
Yes. Oh, it's a racist caricature of a Mexican.
So sorry,
I'm watching the
people.
early 60s
Wait
one.
till next week.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I would say, I mean, my big takeaway from the whole thing is that I definitely actually do want to go back and read more. There were even passages of this first, which again is very formative. He's still working it out. Even the art style changes radically
Yeah.
across that first couple of years of strips, right? And you really see the confidence kind of coming in. You see some that are very kind of realistically drawn, or like interesting stuff like foreshortening or like camera angles, things that are really, I think, quite ahead of their time um for comics in a way. Like he was a good artist.
Yes,
Um,
yes, yes, yes.
right.
No, no, I think the both of us, right? We're like we'll get back to this. We both want more Dick,
Yeah,
but
no
we
question.
yeah, but we're gonna be selective. Um,
Yes,
it's
yes.
gonna
Not
be
any old dick. No, no,
some flaccid. It's gonna be
rock hard.
firm, up
Indeed.
to the task. Yeah,
Yes.
nothing but the best for us. Nothing but the best Dick for us
Yes.
from now
So
on.
this is an aside, but you know this whole crazy thing about Warren Beatty, right? So Warren Beatty, like I think Dick Tracy movie, that iteration was kind of in development hell for quite a while.
Yes.
It was on and off, it's like almost from the 70s on, right, with different people attached to it and so on. And finally he makes it, and then something later on happens with the rights, like where in order to hang on to the rights, because he still has them, right? He every like 15 years or whatever, he releases like a sequel to Dick Tracy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and what these sequels entail of is him getting the costume out of mothballs and sitting down and talking to like Leonard Maltin or something like that, like as Dick Tracy
Okay.
about like, and then the most recent one was called Dick Tracy Zooms In, and it's Warren Beatty on a Zoom call wearing
Wow.
the fucking yellow fedora just as a fuck you, because he basically as long as it's called Dick Tracy and as long as he's in costume as the character, it re-ups his rights. And it seems to be an absolute like, I don't want anyone while I'm alive, I want no one else to play the part, and
Really?
no one's interested in having him do it.
Wow. He identifies with Dick Tracy that much.
He doesn't want to, or it's just a real like what he got really mad, I guess, when there was a question about the rights or whether they were going to revert to somebody else, and he was just like,
Hmm.
no, I paid money for this. I
Wow.
own Dick Tracy. No one will make a Dick Tracy adaptation on my watch.
That seems a bit of a shame because I was wondering why I would like to see someone try it again. I mean, I'm hoping he's doing it for good reason. Like, not necessarily, "Oh, I insist I play it even I'm 100 years old." I'm assuming he just wants control over it, right? So if they get the right
Right.
setup and they find the right younger actor to
Hmm.
play it, then or maybe he'll direct it or something like that.
Yes, yeah.
So it could be he could be like just, wanting strict quality control or something. I don't know, but that is kind of bizarre.
I really like the low effort of the last one that Dick Tracy zooms in. That
Yeah,
Warren Beatty on
yeah.
a Zoom call, released as an official Dick Tracy. But if you Google like Dick Tracy, like Warren Beatty on IMDb, there's more
Right.
than just the Dick Tracy movie.
Okay.
Uh,
They're on YouTube, I assume, these things. You can see you saw them somewhere, right? You saw the Zoom.
well, I was actually reading about. For some reason, I was reading about, yeah, Dick Tracy special. Tracy zooms in 2023, probably during co or like oh yeah, yeah, they're on YouTube.
Okay. I might
Black
but
Friday.
he might explain himself.
Yeah, yeah. Um, anyway,
Anyway,
bizarre.
we shall be back. Um, we shall be back chock full of dicks one more time, I think.
Mm,
But Nick's gonna cherry pick uh for us.
yes, Yes, yes. I will make sure that the Dick that we see next time is a Dick that won't let us down.
No, no.
Yeah.
A Dick you can rely on.
Yep.
Right, are we done with this childish puerile nonsense?
Yeah.
Just
Yeah,
a
I think we can
rolling in his rotating in his grave. I knew I
Yeah.
should have called him Dick.
Dick. Damn it.